from Washington, D.C., this is Balance of Power with Joe Mathieu.
The drumbeat gets louder over war powers in Washington. Welcome to the Friday edition of Balance of Power. As members of Congress demand a say in the administration's military actions in the Caribbean, we're going to talk with the author of a war powers bill that's set to hit the floor coming up when we're joined by Democratic Congressman Jim McGovern of Massachusetts. He's with us in studio today, and we'll tackle the health care debate with our political panel after dueling health care bills failed yesterday in the Senate, setting us up to go over the cliff. Later, our conversation with the CEO of Anchorage Digital, the first federally chartered crypto bank. All after a look at Wall Street. It's not been fun so far. Charlie Pellet has the latest from World Headquarters in New York. What's going on, Charlie?
Right now, we are lower across the board. Joe Mathieu, the key takeaway perhaps at this hour, we are off session lows, but still looking at a loss of almost 1% in the S&P 500 index. Down 63 now at 68.37. The real damage, though, being done among tech names. Case in point, Oracle, the stock down again today, tumbling 4.2%. Broadcom, after earnings, down 10.8%. NASDAQ down 1.4%. The NASDAQ 100 index down 1.7%. Keeping it all in context, S&P 500 index lower by 64, down 0.9, while the Dow is down 151, a decline of 0.3%. So stocks are extending losses, a sell-off in technology dragging global gauges from the brink of records. The 10-year, 4.18%, the 2-year, 3.53%, and the 30-year, 4.85%. Gold at $42.92 the ounce. Spot gold up 0.3%. Silver down 3%, $61.67 the ounce. West Texas Intermediate crude, we'll call that flat on the day now, $57.62 a barrel. And Bitcoin down almost 3%, $90,161 on Bitcoin. President Trump says Thailand and Cambodia have agreed to stop fighting after he spoke with their leaders to urge them to end, quote, the very unfortunate reawakening of their long-running war. Recapping, S&P down 65, down 0.9%. Right now, Balance of Power continues. Back we go to Washington. Once again, your host, here he is, Joe Mathieu.
All right, Charlie, we thank you. 20 minutes from now, we'll check in the markets one more time with Charlie Pellet as we make our way through a bumpy Friday here on Wall Street. Here in Washington, it's matters of war and peace making news today, and we just got a string of headlines from the White House after the president took to Truth Social to let us know about a call that he had a short time ago. Again, matters of war and peace. Trump says he had a good conversation with the prime ministers of both Cambodia and Thailand, knowing that he helped these two countries and a conflict recently. He talks about it frequently as he dials up the number of wars that he says he helped to stop. In this case, Thailand, Cambodia will go back to their original peace accord. Both agreed to cease all shooting. A ceasefire will be effective this evening, according to the President of the United States. We still have a lot of questions, though, about Ukraine. With the headline on the terminal, Trump says U.S. would help with Ukraine's security in a peace deal here. And this is a bit of an update based on what we have seen and heard from the president most recently. President talking as well about this idea of potentially going to Europe as soon as this weekend for peace talks. He's not planning to. Here's what the president said.
We'll see whether or not we attend the meeting. We said we'll attend the meeting if we think there's a good chance of they want me to attend, they want us to attend. And we'll be attending the meeting on Saturday in Europe if we think there's a good chance. And we don't want to waste a lot of time. We think it's negative. We want it to get settled. As you know, in the past, we spent, could be $350 billion giving it to Ukraine. We got nothing in return. But we gave it to Ukraine. I ended up getting rare earth in return, even though I didn't spend money. And we are now selling weapons to NATO. We're not selling it to Ukraine. We're selling weapons at full price to NATO, as you know. They distribute those weapons probably to Ukraine for the most part.
All right, so it doesn't sound like we're going to the meeting on Saturday. But the president again says the U.S. would be willing to contribute assistance to Ukraine as part of a security agreement to end the war. And this really could be seen as progress. Bloomberg Washington correspondent Tyler Kendall's been tracking it for us, having just come back from the White House. Tyler, are we talking about assistance militarily, financially, or both?
Well, it could be both, Joe, though we haven't gotten those exact details from the White House yet. But you're exactly right. It is significant that President Trump is speaking openly about this when it comes to any potential security guarantees for Ukraine, because this has long been a sticking point that Ukraine and our European allies have been pushing this White House to commit to. Because as you well know, for months, we often heard from U.S. officials that any sort of guarantees would be implicit guarantees because the U.S. would have a vested economic interest in Ukraine after inking that critical minerals deal earlier this year. Then the tone started to shift, and we know that the U.S. had committed to things like intelligence sharing and air cover defenses in that way. But we know what Ukraine really wants is something a little more similar to NATO's Article 5 mutual defense clause, and it has yet to be clear whether or not the U.S. would go that far to make such a commitment. But we know that really what the U.S. wants to do is see some forward progress when it comes to these ongoing peace discussions. And while it is unclear and at this point doesn't seem like the U.S. is going to take part in these talks over the weekend, it is worth mentioning, Joe, that the Ukrainian President Zelensky did have a phone call earlier this week with Secretary of State Marco Rubio, with Special Envoy Steve Witkoff, and it is becoming very clear that the U.S. is pushing European allies and pushing Ukraine to get on board when it comes to this peace proposal that's been evolving.
Hey, Tyler, we're going to be talking in a moment with Congressman Jim McGovern about a War Powers Act following the activity that we have seen in the Caribbean. We just seized an oil tanker, as you and I have been discussing. There are big questions about the legality surrounding all of this and exactly what we're going to do. But the White House is signaling that there will be more where this came from. What can you tell us?
Right, and that confirms some pretty incredible reporting from our colleagues at Bloomberg News. People familiar telling us that the U.S. has now entered a new phase when it comes to their strategy with Venezuela amid the seizure of the oil tanker, but also additional sanctions this week from the Treasury Department against oil companies, oil tankers, and close associates of Maduro. This is designed to block off Maduro's access to these critical oil revenues in a bid to get him to relinquish power. Keep in mind, about 80% of Venezuela's export revenue is tied to oil. So our understanding is Venezuela right now is preparing potentially for the U.S. to go further and seize additional oil tankers. And this is going to be really critical, one, to their economy, but also as we look at those broader geopolitical relations. And we know that so much of Venezuela's oil ultimately makes its way to China. So it's something that we're going to be watching very closely here. Now, this specific tanker that we are discussing, as you and I discussed last hour on Balanced Power, it's now heading for Houston. The White House press secretary Caroline Leavitt confirmed yesterday that the U.S. does have intent to seize the oil on board. According to satellite imagery, we're tracking about 1.85 million barrels of Venezuelan crude on that tanker.
Wow. Yeah, map go on your terminal. Tyler, thank you so much for the update. Speaking of the terminal, this headline just went red. States to sue Trump over $100,000 H-1B visa application fee. This has been a pretty controversial idea, and it looks like it's going to court. Let's stick with Venezuela for a moment, though, knowing that this boat has been seized. And look, we've got another 6 tankers that have been sanctioned. So we could soon have our own shadow fleet, it sounds like. The president talked about this yesterday at the White House. Listen.
It's about a lot of things, but one of the things it's about is the fact that they've allowed millions of people to come into our country from their prisons, from gangs, from drug dealers, and from mental institutions, probably proportionately more than anybody else. So it has to do with a lot of things. They've treated us badly, and I guess now we're not treating them so good.
That's where we start our conversation with the gentleman from Massachusetts who has authored a War Powers Act that could soon hit the floor. Unless, of course, the speaker doesn't want to see that happen. This is a conversation that Democrats and Republicans are having here in Washington. Jim McGovern, Democrat from Massachusetts, ranking member on the House Rules Committee, with us in studio right now. It's really great to see you.
Happy to be with you.
Thanks for coming in, Congressman.
My pleasure.
You've introduced this War Powers resolution some time ago. Will it hit the floor soon?
Yeah, I expect to force a vote on it next week. It'll be ripe to be considered on Wednesday or Thursday of next week. We have Republican co-sponsors, Representative Massey and Representative Bacon and Marjorie Taylor Greene are on board on this resolution as well. Again, this is not a Democratic initiative. I mean, this is a bipartisan effort by those of us who actually believe the Constitution means something and Congress has a role to play. And we don't want this president going into a war without a debate and without a vote and authorization by Congress.
Would this be specific to Venezuela or more broad?
It would be specific to Venezuela because that's the conflict we seem to be getting sucked into.
Yeah.
Although the clip you just showed of the president, he went on to further threaten Colombia, where he might do further action. But look, wars are easy to get into; they're hard as hell to get out of. And we have a history, of talking tough, of getting sucked into these wars that cost, billions and billions of dollars, and then we find ourselves in a quagmire that we can't get out of.
Now, I know for a fact that you understand the politics of the Caribbean better than most on Capitol Hill. You helped to begin normalizing relations with Cuba in the Obama administration. You've spent a lot of time in the region. So what do you think the president's aim is here? Is it regime change or something else?
Yeah, I think it's oil, quite frankly.
Yeah?
I think this president is not about promoting human rights. He doesn't give a damn about democracy. And this is not about drugs. I mean, he pardoned the former president of Honduras, who's one of the biggest narco traffickers in the world.
Hundreds of tons of cocaine.
So I think, there must be some financial interest in pursuing this policy for the president, because that's all he really cares about, making money for his family and money for those who are close to him. Look, our history in Latin America has been one of arrogance, has been one of putting profits ahead of human rights. And by the way, this administration doesn't give a damn about human rights. They just issued their national security strategy. And this is the first administration that has removed the word human rights from the strategy. So this is about Donald Trump's ego, and it's about, I think, oil. I think that's, at the end of the day, I think that's what it's about.
Is that why we're seizing tankers?
Again, it would be nice if we had a functioning Congress that would call his administration up and ask these questions like, why are we doing this? Why now? Again, this is not about drugs. More drugs are coming from Mexico and China than from Venezuela. So what is the strategy here? And the president's threatening, action on the ground in Venezuela. Now that's war. He's threatening to cut off, air traffic. He
says we're going to do the land.
Right. So
do you think that he would actually strike with ground targets in Venezuela?
Well, if he does, that's an act of war. Yeah. That's an act of war.
Is blowing up drug boats not an act of war?
Well, I think it is. We have some of my colleagues are debating that issue. But we're not only blowing up drug boats. It appears that we are guilty of serious human rights crimes by actually bombing survivors who are begging for help. Again, Congress ought to be demanding a clearly defined mission in terms of what he is doing in Venezuela. And up to this point, there have been very few questions, and he's provided very few answers.
You said something interesting, a functioning Congress. Yeah. Just back off what we're talking about here for a minute. We are in a world now where it does seem that discharge petitions and reconciliation bills are the only way to get anything done in the Congress. Do you feel that way? Yeah, you're on the Rules Committee. You know how this works.
Yeah. This Congress, under Republican leadership, does not function. It is not working. It is a terrible disservice to the American people. This is a place where trivial issues are getting debated passionately and important ones not at all. We have a health care crisis right now. People are seeing their health care premiums skyrocket. People are deciding to go without health insurance next year because the costs are so high. We need to be talking about extending the ACA tax credits so that people can afford their health insurance. And we're not doing that. We're talking about stupid stuff, stuff that is probably not even going to even be considered by the Senate, that is going nowhere. Again, Congress, a functioning Congress means that we do the work of the American people. And I'd like to think, no matter, what your politics may be, making sure that we are addressing issues of affordability, which includes the cost of health care, are front and center. If the Republicans have a plan, then bring the plan to us. Let's debate it and vote on it. Yeah. They've got nothing.
Well, let's talk about health care, because Republicans put up a bill in the Senate yesterday. It failed. Right. Then the Democratic plan failed. The Democratic plan, of course, would extend Obamacare subsidies. The Republican plan, produced by Bill Cassidy, would have health savings accounts. Congressman, I spoke with Nicole Malliotakis yesterday, who has signed on to a bipartisan effort in the House, D's and R's, that would extend the subsidies, would add some eligibility controls as well. Because someone like Nicole Malliotakis is not a fan of the Affordable Care Act, as she told us yesterday. Let's listen.
There's so much fraud here, which is why we think we have the proper balance. And this gives us enough time, by the way, to then work over the next year or two to be able to come up with something that can truly replace the Affordable Care Act and bring costs down. Now, what the Speaker and leadership are saying is that we're going to take up a health savings account measure, which will help people certainly with their medical costs, and I support that initiative, but it doesn't go far enough.
Okay, but this is unlikely to see the floor unless the discharge petition makes that happen.
And even if we do the discharge petition route, we won't be able to get to it until probably in early January.
Sure.
My question to Representative Malliotakis is, like, where the hell have you been? I mean, you're a Republican. Your party's in charge. We've been talking about this issue for months. This is not something
since before the shutdown.
Right, since before the shutdown, well before. We've been talking about it during reconciliation, right? So we go back months and months and months, and we've been saying we got to focus on this. And all we've been hearing from Republicans is like, oh yeah, we'll get to it, and now we're out of time. People are going to lose their health insurance. Healthcare ought to be considered a fundamental human right for everybody in this country. You know, I mean, you need healthcare. If you don't have healthcare, you end up in an emergency room.
Right.
You know, I mean, this is crazy. So look, there are a number of discharge petitions that have been introduced with various approaches to helping people afford their health insurance. I mean, let's figure out what the best one is and let's move on it. But the stalling and the excuses and the finger pointing, it has to end. You know, we want to debate this issue. We want to vote on this issue. We want to help the millions of people in this country who are about to get screwed.
What's the conversation in Worcester, Massachusetts right now? If you stop in Kelly Square and ask somebody about their health insurance, are they seeing these increases and dropping off the rolls? Or are they saying, I can't afford it anyway, so to your point, I'm going to go to the emergency room when I get a call?
So, I mean, we're hearing some really terrible stories of people basically saying, I can't afford my health insurance. Our office is getting inundated with calls. Look, people in Worcester just want us to do our job. And they get it. There are differences between Democrats and Republicans. But at the end of the day, they want us to get something done. You don't have to agree on everything to agree on something. But whatever that something is, it has to be about improving the quality of life for the people who live in Worcester and all around the country. And the problem with what the Senate did on the Republican side is the stuff that they're proposing, you know, it doesn't mean anything in anybody's life. I mean, you know, saying I'm fixing health care, but in reality not fixing health care, not making it more affordable, well, that doesn't help anybody, right? You know, we ought to have a larger discussion on how we fix our entire healthcare system, because it's a mess. It's too for-profit oriented.
Yeah, okay.
But we're not going to do that in a week or two, right? Right now, we need to extend these tax credits so that millions of people don't see their premiums skyrocket and millions don't lose their health insurance.
We've only got about a minute left here. A terminal user just wrote us while we're talking. Ask the congressman why the ACA failed that they designed. Maybe I can reframe that a bit. A lot of Republicans come on the air and they say this thing was never affordable. Obamacare itself has raised premiums. Is this plan broken?
No, look at it. I think it's not perfect.
Yeah.
But it is better than the alternative, which is no ACA, right? I mean, the bottom line is millions and millions of people have coverage because of the Affordable Care Act. You know, if we extended the tax credits, it's affordable. But as I said, we need to have a bigger conversation. Look, if it was up to me, we would have a Medicare for all system. When I was the chairman of the Rules Committee, we were the first committee, either the House or Senate, to do a hearing on Medicare for all. And I'll tell you, it was a very, very powerful hearing. But you know, to fix health care holistically, you know, is going to take some time. In the meantime, let's extend those tax credits. Let's help people afford their health insurance.
Let's talk when the War Powers Act hits the floor. We've got a lot more to talk about, Congressman. Let's do this next time at Coney Island.
All right, I'm with you.
Onions or no?
Yeah, with onions.
With onions. It's the only way to do it.
Best hot dogs in the world.
They really are, too. I'm Joe Mathieu in Washington. Congressman Jim McGovern of Massachusetts. This is Bloomberg. The question of states' rights being debated fiercely here in Washington when it comes to AI regulations. This is not a new issue, but it's one the president decided to step into. Signing an executive order just yesterday, it happened late in the day, to essentially make it impossible for states to have their own AI regulations. This is a nationwide blanket, as the president says, to help companies cut through the red tape and continue growth to compete with China. We talked about this earlier today. A fascinating conversation on Bloomberg TV and radio with the president's crypto and AI czar, David Sachs. Let's listen.
The problem that we see is that you've got 1,000 different bills going through state legislatures right now to regulate AI, and over 100 measures have already passed. Some of these bills are contradictory, and you've got 50 different states running in 50 different directions. That type of compliance regime is going to be very hard for small companies and startups, especially innovators, to comply with. And so what we need is a single federal or national framework for AI regulation. And in the meantime, create tools that the administration can use to push back on examples of the most onerous and excessive state regulations.
So what does this do? This order directs the U.S. Attorney General to establish what they're calling an AI litigation task force to challenge state AI laws that they feel are inconsistent with the policy. It also directs, in this case, Howard Lutnick, the Commerce Secretary, to publish an evaluation of existing state AI laws and issue a notice specifying which ones can stay and which ones need to go. Let's play it to the panel. Bloomberg Politics contributors Rick Davis and Jeanne Zaino are with us. Rick is our Republican strategist and partner at Stonecourt Capital. Jeanne is Democracy Visiting Fellow at Harvard Kennedy School's Ash Center, our Democratic analyst. Rick, have Republicans turned away from states' rights?
Oh, that's a legitimate question. Certainly this president doesn't think much about them. He's railed against state actions a lot, and he's obviously used the full power of the federal government to institute things like law and order in states against their interests. So, yeah, I think that this president is creating a new dynamic within the Republican Party that basically treads on the states' rights issues pretty well. Although, that being said, there are a number of Republican governors who have also opposed this effort by the president to have a blanket AI regulation usurping the states' rights. And so I don't think this debate is over.
This is, again, not new. In fact, there's been legislation. Senator Ted Cruz has tried to push this over the line a couple of times here, Jeanne. So what's going to happen? Are we going to have 50 lawsuits to track here?
Probably more than 50, Joe. We also had Steve Scalise, who also had a bill. They've been unable to push those through. And I think that that is absolutely where our attention should be. Donald Trump is not wrong to say we need federal policy regarding AI. The problem is just what you were talking to Representative McGovern about. We have an inept Congress, a do-nothing Congress. You can't turn to Congress and say, why don't you get on top of this? I mean, we all know, for instance, we have a huge privacy problem in this country. For years, we have yet to have federal regulation of privacy rights. What do we have? 50 states doing 50 different things. Same thing in AI. It is a problem. So on that, the president's instincts are right here. The problem is doing it through an EO, of course. And then the other part of the problem is the fact that the president is so cozy with all of the big people who are in charge of AI in this country. I mean, I'm just reflecting on Time Magazine's cover of, the person of the year this year is the architects of AI. They're all sitting like on that bridge building the new century. That's a problem when AI is threatening young people graduating from colleges who can't get jobs. That's a problem when you have a president who has so much himself personally and his businesses invested in this. And they are all surrounding him at the inauguration and coming in and out of the White House. So on the one hand, Trump is right. We do need federal policy and regulation. We don't need it this way. It is the job of Congress. And yet we can't turn to them on this or much else these days.
So it sounds like Jeanne has a bit of a bad taste in her mouth when it comes to these relationships. Rick, she's right. Everyone's sitting on that girder on the cover of Time Magazine's been spending time in the Oval Office recently. But I'm struck by something that Scott Bessent said. He uses this line a lot. It's pass-fail versus China. We have the lead. We've got to maintain it. There's no second place in the AI race. Is that something that Americans need to start getting their heads around?
Yeah, look, I don't think it's insignificant what Secretary Bessent says. It is a race against time for technology that'll transform our economies. And just like the Industrial Revolution bolted the United States into a prime spot in the global economic sphere, so will AI. And so I tend to agree with Jeanne on this idea that you do need a general plan for the country related to that. And I doubt if Bessent disagrees, because that's basically what Trump is saying. But like, the place to have that debate is in Congress. Congress is the only body that can pass a law that usurps state law, and so an EO can be thrown away in the garbage the minute a new president steps in. And I would remind Jeanne, all these guys who are now for Trump were all for Biden 4 years ago, and so I think it's a good thing that industry is cooperating with the government. I think if it were the opposite, we would really have significant problems. So yeah, let's win the race. Let's improve our own economy by having this kind of productivity.
Well, Jeanne, if everybody's going to court over AI, looks like they're going to court over the president's new visa plan. This is a story that broke after we came to air. A group of states here announcing that they will be suing the administration to block this $100,000 fee for new H-1B visa applications, which allow employers to hire what they call skilled foreign workers. This is a different program than some you might see for agriculture, et cetera. These H-1Bs are specific to the companies we're actually talking about. Jensen Huang was asked about it. He seemed to indicate, Jeanne, that $100,000 was worth it based on the incredible amount of work that they have to perform here in the United States when it comes to AI and other emerging technologies. How's this going to pan out when it comes to the H-1B?
So, Joe, if I can just circle back to Scott Bessent for a moment, can you please ask him if that's the case and there's no second place, why then are we selling NVIDIA chips to China? I just have to ask that. Going back to the H-1B visas, I think the problem is that we want to use what has long been our most important strength, and that is the fact that so many of us are either immigrants or the children or the grandchildren of immigrants. And when you say it is going to cost $100,000 to come in on one of these visas, that is a whole scale switch from where we've been in multitudes that I can't even count because I'm no mathematician, but it's a lot of money. So yes, if companies want to pay that on behalf of workers, great. But you should not make our system one in which you can only come in if you are wealthy or beholden to wealthy people. We should be bringing in and supporting the best and the brightest in the world, if indeed we want to win this competition against China and other parts of the world that Scott Bessent is talking about. So many of these things just don't seem to add up if you're talking about competing with China. You know who's welcoming people without this kind of cost? China. So we should be doing the same.
Really interesting point, Jeanne. This case is being led, by the way, from Massachusetts Attorney General Andrea Campbell and California AG Rob Bonta, who put out a statement, Rick, that says, as the world's fourth largest economy, California knows that when skilled talent from around the world joins our workforce, it drives our state forward. The Trump administration thinks it can raise costs on a whim, but the law says otherwise. Can the president do this?
It's a little sketchy. Executive action doesn't have the impact if they actually ran a bill through Congress where they amended the H-1B visa program and made it a statute. It'd be ironclad. Again, I think we're just tripping over ourselves as a party by not really instilling these ideas into some kind of, hard legislative agenda that will become the rule of law rather than the whim of the presidency. And look, remember, nobody gets in on an H-1B visa who isn't sponsored by a company that's going to already have them hired and put them to work. Right. It's not like you just wander into the United States and go looking for a job if you're a computer engineer. And so, it's a little more structured than I think Jeanne wants to portray. But at the end of the day, it does limit the people who can pay for this to the Jensen Huangs, because not everybody can afford an extra $100,000 on top of what they're already going to pay somebody like this. So I do think it's an unfair advantage for very wealthy trillion-dollar companies when you talk about the distribution of this kind of talent into the United States.
You could just buy a Trump gold card, Jeanne. We didn't talk about this. The administration debuted the website Wednesday. It's online right now, opening up applications for the gold card, which is basically an expedited visa here. If you pay $1 million, makes $100,000 sound pretty cheap, doesn't it?
It absolutely does. Again, you're going to make the talent coming in here be beholden to the wealthiest billionaires. And the president, of course, as the polls show, he's comfortable there. That's where he lives. He doesn't understand why people feel like they're suffering economically. But the reality is not that for most people in the United States and certainly around the world. And no, I'm not thinking that people are wandering into the country, but the reality is you want to make companies who are building not have to spend $100,000 to bring talent in.
Great analysis, as always, from our signature panel. Jeanne, Zaino, Rick Davis. They'll be back on the late edition of Balance of Power. Thank you both. I'm Joe Mathieu in Washington. This is Bloomberg. Pass the hot sauce, as Nathan Dean likes to say at Bloomberg Intelligence. There's hot sauce on the pot stocks today, and if you've been listening to Charlie, you know why. A report in the Washington Post getting us back around this idea of President Trump warming up to weed. Must have gotten a call from Roger Stone. Trump seeks to cut restrictions on marijuana through planned order. This is rescheduling we're talking about here, and it's something that a lot of folks expected during the campaign. Maybe not so much after the president took office. This is, by the way, an idea that was pursued by the Biden administration. Never ended up happening, as the president now is expected to direct agencies to reclassify marijuana as a Schedule III drug, similar to common painkillers. It is currently in the same class as heroin. And this would not legalize marijuana, but it would allow cannabis companies to see the light of day and potentially use a bank. It would also mean a different tax status, and that's why we're seeing these stocks take off. We thought we'd dial up Nathan Dean to get his take on this. Of course, at Bloomberg Intelligence, our senior U.S. policy analyst who's fielding calls on this all the time because, as you can tell us, Nathan, welcome back. Cannabis investors are passionate and very active, and they have been waiting for good news for a long time. But Lucy keeps pulling the football. Is this actually going to happen?
You know, that's the number one question we got this morning from the clients is this for real now? And what we're telling our clients is that, look, you know, yes, these equities have hot sauce, lots of volatility. MSOS is up 38%. But really, I think what we need to do is see what happens with this order, because the president does not have the authority to unilaterally reclassify it from Schedule 1 to Schedule 3. What I think the order is going to say is that it's going to direct the Department of Justice and the DEA to restart this process of rulemaking change. Now, they're about 70% of the way through, so, I mean, obviously it's not going to be that long. But if the DOJ comes out and says, right, we're going to do this on a speedier method, meaning we're going to forego a hearing, we're just going to move straight to the rulemaking process, they can get this done by the first half of next year. The question, though, is what is going to be in that order? Because obviously, if that order just says I'm going to deem it valid and therefore it's Schedule 3 today, then that's going to have court challenges and uncertainty still reigns.
What's the DEA think about this? Because I thought the tension was coming from within the administration last time we spoke.
Yeah, and it still is. I mean, so obviously we've heard anecdotally that the DEA is not, the staff there is not really on board with this idea. That was prevalent during the Biden administration. We saw no reason why it would change under the Trump administration. In fact, the administrator of the DEA, Terrence Cole, has a 30-year history of fighting marijuana, and he didn't really seem to be that on board with the idea. You know, the Washington Post report even talks about how Speaker Johnson tried to rebut some of President Trump's arguments here. So what we're telling our clients is that, look, even if reschedulization goes forward, it's not legalization. It doesn't lead to increased market share for these companies. What it does is it changes the tax code, something called 280E. So rather than paying a 40% 40% tax rate, you're down to around 10 to 15%. So that's obviously good for those companies. But, this resistance still remains. And that's why we're at a 30% chance of legalization. And that is what would prohibit market share growth, organic growth, everything like that. This is really just about tax.
Okay. This is good to understand and not to conflate with the Safe Banking Act, right? Was I correct about that? Or these companies would still not be able to use banking services?
Yeah, that's correct. I mean, under the Safer Banking Act, banks would be able to service marijuana businesses. But our theory on that is until it's legislatively changed at the federal level, meaning until the drug is federally legalized, banks, especially the big banks, the publicly traded banks, they're not going to touch marijuana because you're going to be afraid of running into the Bank Secrecy Act or anti-money laundering. And honestly, the revenues just isn't there for the risk. So for these companies, there's two things for market participants to keep in mind. One is the tax issue, and the second is there's a lot of retail sentiment in this hot sauce right now. If you look at the Canadian pot equities, they're also up 30%, and this largely doesn't apply to them. So there's a lot of folks out here saying, you know what, this is good, but just keep in mind there's a lot of retail sentiment here as well.
Well, and that's important because you pointed out MSOS. That's the Advisor Shares Pure U.S. Cannabis ETF, because a lot of these other ETFs fold in, to your point, Canadian companies, right, or tobacco companies, a lot of different grow companies. I think you find a lot of different stuff that you might not expect. For instance, in the MJ ETF, is this what your clients are looking at? Is this what our audience should be tracking?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, what the reschedulization does is that it really opens up the mom and pop aspect for marijuana. So think of like the mom and pop farms in Oklahoma and Colorado and so forth. Those are the businesses that this is really geared towards. Now, the reason why it's positive for the bigger companies is because we do anticipate that there's going to be significant consolidation in this industry as incrementally things get better and better and better in terms of the legality of the drug. This is not an easy business to be in right now. And so as you get more of a regulatory framework, usually it's the big players that gobble up the smaller players, and then they are the ones that have the technology spend, the compliance spend, the legal spend that can deal with these regulations. So if President Trump does reclassify this, let's just say middle of next year, the tax relief will be there for the 2026 tax season in 2027, and then you will start to see, I think, some consolidation amongst the bigger players gobbling up the smaller players. But again, it doesn't really change the idea in terms of organic market share growth or anything like that. It just really just changes the finances of the system.
All right, makes a lot of sense. MSOS is the ticker as we spend time with Nathan Dean, backed by his iconic image of Stumpy at the Tidal Basin in Washington. There's got to be some connection here for a plant that grows freely from the earth. Nathan Dean, I want to ask you while you're with us about crypto, because you're out with the 2026 Outlook, U.S. crypto policy on Bloomberg Intelligence. To what extent will this industry and this investment class evolve in the new year?
So 2026 is going to be a tremendous year for crypto, and there's really three things to keep in mind. One is stablecoins. Now, the FDIC and the Fed, they're expected to release a proposal almost, I think, within the next week or so, implementing the Genius Act. This is the first of two proposals we think are coming. This is more about applications and registration, not all that exciting. But at the end of the year, stablecoin issuers are going to have a regulatory framework. You have the SEC and the CFTC moving forward with Project Crypto, taking off the enforcement risk, allowing these companies to innovate without the fear of that regulatory albatross hanging around their neck. And then you have the House and Senate discussions for this broader crypto market structure bill. Yes, there was a little bit of hiccup this week, but I do stand by our call that we do think that there's a 70% chance of this passing in the first half of next year, which would then give additional regulatory clarity for companies like Coinbase and Robinhood.
Pretty big deal. Watching crypto today, a little bit lower. We're down 2.5% on Bitcoin. Nathan, thank you so much. Have a great weekend. Nathan Dean at Bloomberg Intelligence with smart analysis on weed and crypto. We'll pursue the latter now with an important conversation that I've been looking forward to. Nathan McCauley. We go from one Nathan to another. The CEO and co-founder of Anchorage Digital, which you may not have heard of, but you should know about. Anchorage is the first federally regulated crypto bank in the country. Nathan, welcome. It's great to have you as part of our conversation on Bloomberg TV and radio. Are you getting what you need from Washington? And what do you expect in the new year?
Listen, first of all, it's wonderful to be here. Thanks so much for having me on the show. We are absolutely getting what we need from Washington. Genius Act passed earlier this year, which created the federal regulatory framework for stablecoins. Since then, we have announced 4 partnerships with stablecoin issuers, including the stablecoin giant Tether that is going to be working with us to issue their U.S. version of their stablecoin. So the Genius Act has just been incredible. Really excited for market structure, which is coming next, which will lay the groundwork for how to think about trading, securities, and the whole landscape across the digital asset ecosystem.
Well, this is really interesting. To what extent has this changed the crypto landscape as we see stablecoin usage increase dramatically following the legislation that's passed? And some have suggested that it has turned investors away from Bitcoin, from Ethereum, from other tokens. Do you see that happening?
No, I see quite the opposite. I see that among institutional investors that are looking at the digital asset ecosystem, their conviction in Bitcoin as a store of value is only growing. We're seeing an incredible amount of inflows into our custody system from institutional investors looking to invest in digital assets. In fact, now all of the large ETFs in the country are now utilizing Anchorage Digital as a custodian, listed on all of their S1s. But even further than that, what we're seeing is as stablecoins grow, stablecoins are not going to be competitive with the blockchains. In fact, they are going to be using the blockchains. And so I think one of the biggest benefactors of the stablecoin trend is going to be the chains themselves, Ethereum, Solana, and the other chains where these stablecoins settle and live are going to see a lot more growth there. So I think it's an accelerant both for the stablecoin ecosystem and for the entire ecosystem at large.
Well, that's really interesting, and I appreciate you describing that at a time, of course, where we've seen some real volatility in crypto, and specifically, my gosh, what we've seen in Bitcoin and Ethereum specifically over the past couple of weeks has prompted a lot of concern. And we've had people on this program, Nathan, suggest that we could be going into another crypto winter. What would you say to them?
The way that I think about it is that these are assets that are best measured in decades in terms of their investment thesis. Thinking about your entry price for assets can definitely be something to think about. But as Bitcoin grows as a store of value on a global basis, as we have smart contract languages like Ethereum and Solana that have a kind of a long run track record here. I think what we see among our institutional investors is that long-term time horizon, 10, 20, 30 years being the thing that matters, and a little bit less focus on, say, the cyclical sine wave that is the crypto bear and bull cycles.
Talk to me about security, secure usage, ensuring the fact that these assets are not used for criminal enterprise, as Senator Elizabeth Warren frequently warns. We hear this conversation a lot in hearings in Washington, D.C. What do you have to think?
Sure. So I think there's a couple ways to think about that. The first one is software security considerations. Can you hold the assets and keep them secure and safe? My company, Anchorage Digital, operates a national bank where we hold assets for institutional investors. And the primary thing we provide to them is security, safekeeping of their assets. And so we've developed a ton of security procedures, and that's really well appreciated and is really central to any investment thesis in the crypto assets, is thinking about the security of your assets. The second part of your question is around, what do we think about how stable coins and other assets are used on a global scale?
Yeah.
As I mentioned, we operate as a national bank, so we completely comply with all federal regulations around BSA, AML, sanctions, and all of that. And so I think in many ways we have proven that it is possible to operate like that and to operate crypto asset businesses fully and completely within the regulatory perimeter of the laws and regulations of the United States.
Well, in our remaining moment, Nathan, what does your charter mean for the rest of the industry? Will we see more banks like yours and create a new class of banking?
I hope so. So we are the first and as yet only operational federally chartered digital asset bank. But I expect that we are the first of many. The way I like to say it is that there used to be such a thing as internet companies. Now that is just called a company. And we are a crypto bank, and I think there one day will come in the U.S. where every bank will be a crypto bank. And so we are one of one at this point, but I look forward to be one of 4,000, and we look to help enable all the rest of the banks to come into this space. And so looking forward to even more adoption there within the banking industry.
I appreciate your being with us. He's the co-founder, CEO of Anchorage Digital. Nathan McCauley with us on Bloomberg. Thank you, sir, for the insights. I'll meet you back here on the late edition of Balance of Power. And we could have news from the White House as the president is set to tangle with reporters about an hour from now. Much more to follow as Bloomberg Business Week Daily kicks off here. We'll have a look at the market straight ahead, and I'll meet you back here at 5 p.m. This is Bloomberg.